The entire studio went silent the moment Jasmine Crockett leaned into the mic. It wasn't the kind of silence that creeps in gradually. It was instant, sharp, like air sucked out of the room. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if unsure they were supposed to be rolling when history was unfolding in real time. Rachel Maddow sat across from her, posture flawless, expression radiating the confidence of someone who had spent years untouchable behind a desk of authority. Smug, polished, certain. She was the conductor of this orchestra, and she believed every note would bend to her command. But Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She didn't blink, didn't shuffle in her seat. She simply leaned forward, tilted her head slightly, and with a voice both calm and cutting, delivered one line that sliced through the performance like glass, shattering on marble. The words landed like a lightning strike. They were not shouted. They were not embroidered with clever turns of phrase. They were simple, sharp, undeniable, and for the first time in years, Rachel Maddow's expression cracked. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Gasps, nervous laughter, a ripple of disbelief that spread across the room. Online, within seconds, the clip was already racing through timelines, hashtags igniting in real time. And there sat Jasmine Crockett, still calm, still unshaken, as if she had simply stated the obvious. But to understand why this single sentence hit like a thunderclap, we need to rewind. To grasp the force of that moment, you have to understand the arena it took place in. Rachel Maddow's show wasn't just another cable news segment. It was a stage of power, a cathedral of commentary, where narratives were written and reputations either elevated or erased. For years, Maddow had reigned as an unchallenged voice, sharp, witty, untouchable. Her audience trusted her authority, her peers respected her dominance, and her guests often found themselves cornered in verbal traps before they even realized the walls were closing in. So, when Jasmine Crockett stepped into that studio, the balance was already tilted. On one side sat a media titan with years of credibility and a platform polished to perfection. On the other, a congresswoman still dismissed in some circles as too bold, too direct, too unwilling to play the careful game of political theater. Maddow was the gatekeeper. Crockett, in the eyes of many, the outsider who had been allowed into the room, but not expected to own it. The stakes were higher than two women debating policy on television. This wasn't just about politics. It was about identity, dignity, and who gets to tell the American story. Would it be the polished voice of elite media, or the unapologetic clarity of a woman who had fought her way into Congress without asking for permission? The tension was palpable even before the infamous line. Every exchange, every look, felt weighted with history. And as the conversation inched closer to confrontation, no one in that room realized they were about to witness a rupture. Because what happens next doesn't just change the room, it changes the narrative across the country. For more than a decade, Rachel Maddow had been a fixture of late-night political television, her voice cutting through the noise with a mixture of wit, sharp analysis, and the kind of authority that made even her critics tune in. She was the intellectual warrior of cable news, armed with facts, footnotes, and a delivery so precise it left little room for interruption. Night after night, she had cornered senators, skewered talking points, and dismantled opponents with the effortless poise of someone who knew she was smarter than nearly everyone in the room. Her strengths were undeniable. Maddow could take a complex issue and weave it into a gripping monologue. She could outwit, outtalk, and outmaneuver with ease. But behind that brilliance lay an undertone many had noticed a habit of talking over guests when they dared to stray off her script, a smug tilt of the head when someone tried to challenge her authority, an elitist aura that suggested she wasn't just reporting the story, She was deciding it. For those who admired her, Maddow was a beacon of progressive thought. For those who feared her, she was untouchable. Guests rarely scored points against her, and when they did, the moment was often edited into something less threatening by the time it hit highlight reels. Stepping into her studio was less an interview and more a trial by fire. That was the arena Jasmine Crockett walked into, a lion's den where Maddow was the lion, circling, confident that her claws would keep any challenger in check. The audience at home expected the same. Another politician, another quick dismissal, another segment where Maddow reigned supreme. But Rachel Maddow had never faced someone quite like Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett's story did not begin in the spotlight. It began in the long hours of grassroots organizing, in crowded community centers where the air smelled of coffee and determination, and in courtrooms where she fought for those who couldn't afford a voice of their own. She wasn't groomed by think tanks or polished by cable green rooms. She was shaped by grit, by the kind of uphill battles that leave most people too exhausted to keep going, but somehow made her sharper, steadier, hungrier for justice. Before Congress, she was a public defender in Dallas, taking cases others wouldn't touch, representing clients written off as hopeless. She saw the system from the inside out, saw how poverty and race were wielded like weapons against the vulnerable. Every late-night drafting arguments, every loss that weighed heavy on her shoulders, every small win that kept her going, these were the bricks that built her resilience. When she ran for office, the odds weren't in her favor. She didn't have the backing of big donors or the endorsement of power brokers. She had her voice, her story, and the people who believed she spoke for them because she lived like them. The establishment underestimated her, but voters didn't. They saw someone who wasn't afraid to stand in the fire and take the heat. That authenticity became her armor. In hearings, she refused to let colleagues steamroll her. In interviews, she didn't soften her edges to fit the script, and every scar she carried, every insult, every dismissal, every uphill fight became preparation for the night she would step onto Maddow's stage. To Maddow's audience, she may have looked like just another guest, but for those who knew her journey, Jasmine Crockett wasn't walking into that studio unarmed. She was carrying the weight of her story, the strength of her struggle, and the fire of a woman who had learned long ago that silence was never an option. And the stage was set. One underestimated congresswoman, one untouchable anchor, and millions watching live. The debate began politely enough, with Maddow guiding the conversation in her usual style, confident, quick, and layered with the authority of someone who believed the answers already belonged to her. But it didn't take long before the interruption started. Each time Jasmine Crockett tried to finish a point, Maddow's voice cut in, sharper, louder, steering the discussion back under her control. Most guests would have faltered there, stumbling over their words, trying to force a reply before being overrun. Crockett didn't. She waited. She let the interruptions land, let the smug certainty hang in the air, and then spoke again, slower, calmer, unshaken. The contrast was striking. Maddow's tone grew more insistent, her words snapping like arrows aimed at keeping the upper hand. Crockett, meanwhile, stayed grounded, her voice measured, her presence steady. Viewers at home could feel it, the imbalance of tone, one woman pushing harder, the other refusing to be rattled. In the studio, murmurs began. Guests shifted in their seats. The tension was no longer subtle, it was crackling. And outside the walls of that set, Twitter was already starting to light up. Clips were being posted in real time, comments flooding timelines. Crockett isn't backing down. Is Maddow losing control? Every exchange pulled the rope tighter. Every interruption stretched the patience of the audience thinner. Something was building. Something inevitable. Maddow doubled down once more, her words biting, her tone cutting. And then, with a calmness that felt like thunder before the storm, Jasmine Crockett leaned into the mic. She leaned in, eyes steady, voice low enough to demand silence, yet strong enough to slice through every sound in the room. And then Jasmine Crockett said it the line that would live far beyond the broadcast. "Rachel, people don't tune in to hear you talk over the truth. They tune in because they're desperate to finally hear it." The words didn't echo, they detonated. For a beat, there was nothing. No applause, no chatter, not even Maddow's trademark quick retort. Silence swallowed the set. Cameras held still, zooming just close enough to catch the flicker across Maddow's face, the crack in her veneer. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, the anchor who always had an answer didn't. The panel shifted awkwardly, one guest raising eyebrows, another suppressing a smile. The audience watching at home erupted. In living rooms across America, jaws dropped. Screenshots were taken, captions added, group chats lit up with one simple message. Did she just say that? On Twitter, hashtags began firing like fireworks. #MicDrop, #Crockett vs Maddow, #Truth on Air. The brilliance of the line wasn't in its cleverness, but in its clarity. It wasn't a rehearsed zinger. It was the kind of raw truth that resonated across divides. It exposed the imbalance in the room without shouting, stripped Maddow of her dominance without insult. Timing, tone, and context collided into a single, undeniable moment of cultural electricity. Maddow tried to recover, of course. She adjusted her papers, forced a laugh, tried to launch back into a point. But her rhythm was gone. Each word stumbled. Every attempt to reassert control only highlighted the silence that had followed Crockett's blow. The lion of the den had been stunned, and the underdog stood calm, unshaken, victorious in her composure. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't smirk or raise her voice. She simply leaned back, folded her hands, and let the weight of her words hang in the air, confident that the moment spoke louder than anything else she could add. It was the kind of reversal that rarely happens live, a single sentence flipping the balance of power in front of millions. The underdog had landed the knockout punch, and everyone watching knew they'd just witnessed something unforgettable. But the fireworks weren't confined to the studio. What came next would ripple across the nation. The moment the clip hit the internet, it stopped being just television. It became a cultural event. Within minutes, hashtags were trending worldwide. #Crockett clapback, #Truth over talk, #MicDrop moment. Reaction videos flooded TikTok, each one replaying the line with captions like, "She ended her on live TV." Memes sprouted almost instantly, screenshots of Maddow's stunned face, paired with punchlines. GIFs looping Crockett's calm delivery like a victory lap. Commentators scrambled to respond. Cable rivals aired the clip repeatedly, each framing it as a rare reversal of power. Podcasts dissected the timing, the tone, the undeniable impact. Even late-night comedians couldn't resist weaving it into monologues, painting Crockett as the woman who had done what so few dared, standing toe-to-toe with Rachel Maddow and walking away with the upper hand. Celebrities weighed in. Actors tweeted their approval. Musicians reposted the clip with fire emojis, and activists hailed it as a watershed moment for truth-telling in politics. Politicians, too, took notice. Allies praised Crockett's courage, while even her critics admitted, sometimes grudgingly, that she had struck a chord. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. On one side, Maddow's silence lingered. The absence of her usual dominance became the loudest sound of all. On the other, Crockett's line reverberated like an anthem, transforming her from rising congresswoman into something larger. A folk hero for those who had long felt dismissed, spoken over, or erased. It was more than a viral triumph. It was validation proof that calm dignity could outshine arrogance, that truth could pierce even the brightest lights of media power. Yet beyond the noise of Twitter and headlines, a deeper lesson was unfolding. In the days that followed, Jasmine Crockett made clear that her words weren't about a television feud. They were about something deeper. She reframed the entire debate, reminding people that what happened on that stage wasn't the triumph of a clever insult. It was the triumph of dignity over dismissal, of authenticity over arrogance. Her calm defiance became a symbol that courage, when rooted in truth, will always outlast control. Crockett's line resonated because it wasn't crafted for applause. It was spoken from conviction. It cut through the noise of political theater and media elitism to reach the people who had spent their lives being talked over, underestimated, or ignored. It told them, your voice matters, even when the powerful try to silence it, especially then. The lesson was unmistakable. In an age of polished spin and rehearsed sound bites, the most disruptive act is still honesty. The most radical act is refusing to bow, refusing to let arrogance dictate the story. Crockett showed that truth doesn't need volume, it needs courage. And courage dismantles elitism every single time. For viewers at home, the moment became more than entertainment. It became inspiration. It told immigrants, workers, students, and families across the country that speaking your truth doesn't require a platform as large as Maddow's. It requires only the will to stand firm, the dignity to stay composed, and the belief that your story deserves to be heard. And that's why this wasn't just a viral clip. It was a reminder to America of who we are at our best. And there it was, the moment that stunned Rachel Maddow and left millions replaying Jasmine Crockett's savage line on loop. What began as another night of television became a defining flash of truth, a reminder that even the most untouchable voices can be shaken when dignity stands tall. If this moment moved you, if it made you pause, laugh, or even cheer from your living room, don't let it stop here. Drop a comment below with the part of Crockett's takedown that hit hardest for you. Share this video with friends who need to see it, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the next time truth refuses to back down. Because in the end, truth doesn't whisper, it roars. And when it does, the world has no choice but to listen.